Change your perception, see everything flow in your favor. Written by Kelvin W. Nathan. Published by Audiobooks Office. Introduction. Most people go through life unaware that they are not truly seeing the world. They are only seeing their interpretation of it. Like a pair of tinted glasses, our perceptions filter and color every experience. But what if those glasses are scratched, darkened, or warped by old beliefs, past disappointments, or inherited fear? What if the world has always been flowing in your favor, but your perception hasn't been tuned to recognize it? This book is not about wishful thinking or blind optimism. It is about understanding the power you have, right now, to transform your reality by changing the way you see. Your perception is not just a point of view, it is a creative force. Every decision you make, every emotion you feel,
every opportunity you notice or miss is guided by what you believe about yourself and the world. Two people can walk through the same storm. One sees destruction, the other sees cleansing. One sees chaos, the other sees creation. The storm doesn't change, but perception determines the experience. This is the secret few are ever taught. Reality isn't fixed, it's flexible. When you shift your perception, you shift your experience of reality, and that changes everything. There is a silent story running in the background of your mind, one that was written by childhood conditioning, cultural programming, and past wounds. That story becomes your lens. If your story says that life is hard, unfair, or stacked against you, then your perception will search for proof of that, and it will find it. But if you begin to rewrite that story, to believe that life is for you, that each moment carries meaning and momentum, then you will start to find something else entirely. Alignment, opportunity, grace. This isn't magic, it's mindset. And mindset drives behavior, shapes your emotional state, and ultimately molds the outcomes you experience. Changing your perception doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing to see meaning, progress, and possibility even when things don't go your way. It means asking yourself different questions. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is this here to teach me?" Instead of, "How did I mess this up?" you ask, "How is this guiding me towards something better?" These subtle shifts in thought create powerful shifts in emotion, energy, and behavior. And over time, they begin to reshape the entire landscape of your life. The truth is, you don't need to fight life to succeed. You don't need to force outcomes, manipulate situations, or prove your worth. You simply need to align with the flow that is already moving in your favor. That flow is real. It's been there the whole time. But to step into it, you must believe it exists. You must train your perception to see signs instead of setbacks, direction instead of detour. Life responds to your dominant perception. It mirrors your expectations, not your desires. If you expect favor, favor shows up. If you expect loss, loss follows. This is not superstition, it's psychology and energy at play. This book is your guide to making that shift permanent, not by pretending, not by suppressing pain, but by cultivating a new way of seeing that brings clarity, confidence, and calm. Each chapter will offer you a new lens, a new frame, a new invitation to step into a reality where everything serves your expansion. You'll begin to see patterns where you once saw problems. You'll notice timing that once seemed random. You'll discover that the world hasn't been working against you. It's been waiting for you to wake up and see the truth. It's all flowing in your favor. Welcome to your perception shift. Welcome to your power. Let's begin. For more information about the e-book version of this audio, check the video description or visit audiobooksoffice.com. Chapter 1. The Invisible Script. Every person carries within them an invisible script. It runs quietly in the background like an operating system we didn't install, and yet it governs almost everything we believe, expect, and experience. This script is made up of thoughts we didn't choose, ideas we didn't question, and conclusions we accepted during our earliest years, long before we had the power to think critically or consciously shape our own mindset. These unconscious beliefs form the foundation of our perception, and from that perception we begin to build our lives. But what happens when that foundation is flawed? What happens when the script was written in fear, lack, and limitation? From the moment we're born, we absorb the emotional atmosphere around us. We learn by watching, listening, and sensing. If our caregivers struggled, we internalize that struggle. If we heard phrases like, "money doesn't grow on trees," "life's not fair," or "don't get your hopes up," we started to shape a worldview that equated survival with struggle and ambition with disappointment. This scripting isn't just verbal, it's energetic. A child who feels tension, scarcity, or emotional unpredictability will form beliefs that the world is unstable, unsafe, or unfriendly. And unless questioned, those early impressions harden into lifelong expectations. The dangerous thing about unconscious perception is that it becomes self-fulfilling. If you believe the world is hostile, you'll perceive threats in harmless places. If you believe love always ends in pain, you'll sabotage closeness or chase emotionally unavailable people. If you believe success is only for those kinds of people, you'll unconsciously block yourself from ever becoming one of them. The script becomes a loop, and that loop becomes your life. The frustrating part is that many people think they're being objective. They'll say, "I'm just realistic," not realizing that realism is often just long-standing pessimism dressed up as logic. You're not broken. You're scripted. And the script is not who you are. It's simply a collection of old perceptions that you've been rehearsing for years, often without realizing it. But here's the truth. Any script can be rewritten. Any lens can be replaced. The moment you become aware that your perception has been shaped by outdated programming, you begin to reclaim your power. That awareness alone cracks the illusion. You begin to see that maybe your experiences weren't proof of your limitations. They were simply reflections of what you expected to see. This doesn't mean you're to blame for everything that's happened to you, but it does mean you have the authority to shift what happens next. When you understand that your external reality is responding to your internal script, you stop playing the role of victim and step into the role of author. That shift is everything. The invisible script becomes visible, and once it's visible, it's editable. You can question the thoughts you inherited. You can confront the assumptions that no longer serve you. You can look at your default reactions and ask, "Where did this come from, and do I still want it?" The process begins with honest observation. Pay attention to your thoughts in moments of resistance, anxiety, or doubt. What are you telling yourself? What do you assume is true without question? When an opportunity comes, do you feel unworthy or excited? When a challenge appears, do you brace for loss or anticipate growth? These moments reveal the script in real time. They give you clues to the unconscious expectations shaping your decision. The goal isn't to judge yourself for them. It's to recognize them as optional. Once you see them as optional, they begin to lose their grip. Sometimes the script comes disguised as personality. "That's just who I am," people say. But often that identity was formed as a defense mechanism. Maybe you learned to stay small to avoid criticism. Maybe you became hyper-independent because asking for help was punished. Maybe you're always busy because rest feels unsafe. These aren't fixed traits. They're responses to past environments, and they can be unlearned. When you change the perception that created them, you naturally start to behave in ways that match your truth, not your trauma. One of the most liberating shifts you can make is realizing that life isn't a rigid structure you have to survive. It's a responsive mirror you get to shape. The moment you decide to expect favor, alignment, and support, your perception starts scanning for signs of those things. And because perception directs attention, and attention directs energy, and energy directs experience, your outer world slowly begins to match your new expectation. What once felt random begins to feel intentional. What once seemed chaotic begins to organize around your vision. You were not born with a broken lens. You were born with curiosity, clarity, and openness. The fog came later, from experiences you didn't choose but learned to survive. But now, you're no longer just surviving, you're choosing. And that changes everything. You get to decide how the rest of the story goes. You get to rewrite the script so that life starts showing up in ways that match your new perception. Not because the world suddenly got better, but because you did. You evolved the lens, you adjusted the signal, you upgraded the script, and now everything begins to shift. Chapter 2. Everything is energy, including your thoughts. There is a deeper layer to reality that often goes unnoticed, not because it is hidden, but because we haven't been trained to recognize it. Beneath the surface of all things, people, events, circumstances, there is movement, vibration, and flow. Everything you see, touch, or experience is energy in a different form. That includes you. Your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and expectations all carry energy, and like any energy, they emit a frequency. This frequency is not abstract or mystical. It is measurable in brainwaves, in heart rhythms, in the chemistry of the body. Your perception, fueled by your inner energy, is constantly shaping the signal you broadcast. And life, in its infinite sensitivity, responds accordingly. The problem is that most people don't realize they are transmitting anything at all. They believe their inner world is private, sealed off from the external, but in reality, you are always in communication with the world around you, not just through your words or actions, but through your state. When you think a thought consistently, that thought becomes a belief. When that belief is charged with emotion, especially strong emotion like fear, hope, excitement, or dread, it creates a vibrational imprint that colors your perception and influences your reality. This is why two people can walk into the same room and have wildly different experiences. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat. One feels inspired, the other feels drained. Their energy speaks before they do. We often think that our thoughts are just reactions to what's happening, but in truth, they are powerful agents of creation. They not only interpret reality, they bend it. When you enter a situation expecting something to go wrong, you're not just bracing yourself. You're helping create tension that affects how you behave, how others respond to you, and ultimately how the outcome unfolds. On the flip side, when you approach a situation with calm confidence and an expectation of things going well, you radiate steadiness, and that steadiness shifts the environment. This is not about pretending things are fine. It's about understanding that your inner signal influences your outer experience far more than you've been taught. Your perception acts like a tuner on a radio dial. Whatever you tune into, you hear more clearly. When your internal dial is set to fear, you pick up signals of danger everywhere. When it's set to lack, all you can notice are missing pieces, problems, and what others have that you don't. But when you tune to abundance, you start seeing possibilities. When you tune to peace, you start sensing order, even in moments of apparent chaos. The dial doesn't change the world itself, it changes what you're able to perceive and receive from it. And since you act on what you perceive, your actions begin to reinforce the very frequency you've chosen. Energy attracts energy. This is not just a spiritual concept. It's observed in nature, in physics, in neuroscience. Like attracts like. Patterns reinforce patterns. When you consistently generate energy of openness, gratitude, and trust, you become more sensitive to events, people, and ideas that match that energy. And just as a musician tunes their instrument before a performance, you must tune your perception before engaging with the world. The practice is subtle, but the impact is powerful. You don't need to force outcomes when your frequency is aligned. You become magnetic to what fits that frequency, and you begin to experience more ease, synchronicity, and flow. This is why the shift in perception is not a surface change. It is an energetic recalibration. You are not trying to paint over a cracked wall. You are changing the entire foundation the wall was built on. By choosing new thoughts, releasing old patterns, and anchoring in elevated emotions, you raise your frequency. You shift what you notice, how you interpret events, and how the world responds to you. This is how perception becomes creation, not by controlling every detail, but by aligning with a state that attracts what you once thought was out of reach. It is tempting to think of energy as something distant or esoteric, but it's happening constantly, within and around you. You feel it when you walk into a room and sense tension before anyone speaks. You experience it when someone's joy lifts your mood without them saying a word. You felt it when you made a decision based on a gut feeling and later realized that instinct saved you from something. That's energy at work. It's perception informed by frequency, and once you become aware of it, you can start using it intentionally rather than unconsciously. You have a choice in every moment about the energy you bring. You can feed fear or you can feed faith. You can dwell in what's missing or you can align with what's possible. You can replay old wounds or you can broadcast a new frequency that reflects who you are becoming. This is not about denying difficulty or pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing which signal you amplify. Because what you amplify, you attract, and what you attract, you experience. That's how the loop of energy and perception works. It starts inside you and echoes outward. Everything is energy, including your thoughts. And once you begin to live with that awareness, you stop seeing yourself as powerless. You begin to understand that you are not just responding to life, you are in a dance with it. You send out a rhythm and life echoes back a response. Change the rhythm and the dance changes. That is your power. That is your responsibility. And that is where your new perception begins to take root. Chapter 3. Flip the filter. Every day, from the moment you wake up until you close your eyes at night, your brain is filtering reality. With billions of bits of information surrounding you at all times, your mind cannot possibly process everything. Instead, it relies on your internal filter, a mechanism trained by your beliefs, past experiences, and emotional patterns to decide what to focus on. This filter tells you what matters and what doesn't. It tells you who you are, what you're capable of, and how the world works. But the crucial thing to understand is this: the filter isn't objective. It isn't giving you a true picture of reality. It's showing you a version of life that matches your current perception. And if that perception has been shaped by fear, failure, or frustration, the filter will continue to feed you more of the same. This is why two people can face the exact same situation and come away with completely different interpretations. One sees a problem, the other sees a possibility. One sees a dead end, the other sees a detour to something better. The difference isn't in the event, it's in the filter. Your filter controls what you notice, what you amplify, and what you ignore. If your filter is tuned to lack, you'll overlook abundance. If your filter expects betrayal, you'll miss loyalty. If your filter is conditioned to fear disappointment, you'll sabotage excitement before it even has a chance to grow. Most people walk through life reacting to the world without ever questioning the filter through which they view it. But filters can be changed. They are not fixed. They are flexible and they update with your awareness and intention. The process begins by noticing the default settings. What story does your mind jump to when something unexpected happens? Do you immediately prepare for something to go wrong? Do you brace for loss, criticism, or rejection? Or do you pause, breathe, and remind yourself that this moment could hold something good? The more conscious you become of your automatic responses, the more power you have to interrupt the pattern and flip the filter. Flipping the filter means deliberately choosing a new frame through which to interpret your experiences. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means choosing to look deeper, to consider that there might be a greater order at work, even when circumstances feel chaotic. When you shift your filter, you begin to ask better questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How could this be preparing me?" Instead of declaring this is a disaster, you wonder, "What is this clearing space for?" These aren't mental tricks. They are perception tools that retrain your mind to see meaning where it used to see only mess. Your brain is highly suggestible and it takes its cues from repetition and emotion. If you repeat thoughts of fear, shame, or failure with emotional charge, your brain builds stronger neural pathways to support those perceptions. But if you begin to consistently feed your mind with elevated thoughts, beliefs in possibility, resilience, and abundance, while connecting them to genuine emotion, you begin to install a new default. The filter starts to shift. Slowly at first, then steadily. You begin to notice opportunities where you once saw only obstacles. You start interpreting delays not as punishments, but as divine timing. You understand that life isn't out to get you, it's working with you, nudging you toward the version of yourself you haven't yet fully claimed. There's a reason certain people seem to experience more flow, more favor, and more forward movement. It's not luck, and it's not always external advantage. Often it's internal calibration. They've learned to expect good things, even after setbacks. They've trained their filter to scan for the next aligned step, not the next imagined disaster. This doesn't mean they don't face difficulties. It means they don't let those difficulties define the narrative. They flip the filter, and in doing so, they change what becomes possible. You are the only one who can shift your lens. No one else can do it for you. But the moment you begin, you'll notice how quickly reality starts to reflect the new signal. It might begin with subtle changes, less stress in conversations, more clarity in decisions, a small but meaningful coincidence that affirms your direction. These moments are not random. They are the results of a filter that is beginning to align with a higher vision. And as you continue to flip the filter from fear to faith, from doubt to trust, from limitation to possibility, you will begin to experience a version of life that feels more cooperative, more intuitive, and more aligned with who you really are. Perception is not passive, it is participatory. You are not just receiving life, you are interpreting it, shaping it, and contributing to it with every thought, every belief, every choice. When you reclaim that power, you stop waiting for life to change. You start becoming the change. And as your inner world transforms, the outer world transforms in ways both expected and extraordinary. The filter flips, and suddenly everything starts to look different, not because the world changed, but because you finally changed the way you see. Chapter 4. From Control to Creation. The need to control is a learned survival instinct. Most people at some point internalize the belief that only through force, precision, or relentless management can they keep life from falling apart. Control feels safe. It feels responsible. It gives the illusion that by planning every detail or anticipating every threat, we can prevent disappointment. But control, despite its surface appeal, is often rooted in fear. It is the belief that things will go wrong unless we interfere. It assumes the worst and attempts to steer life from a place of resistance rather than trust. Yet ironically, the more we try to control, the more rigid we become, and the more life pushes back. We begin to mistake effort for progress and struggle for growth, forgetting that creation flows best where space exists. There is a distinct difference between control and co-creation. Control attempts to impose outcomes. Co-creation, on the other hand, is the art of working with life rather than against it. It recognizes that you are not here to dominate your environment. You are here to interact with it, respond to it, and shape it from a place of alignment. In co-creation, you set clear intentions, take meaningful action, and stay open to how and when things unfold. You trust that there is a larger intelligence at play, one that knows timing, one that sees connections you don't, one that rearranges situations not to frustrate you, but to support your highest path. People who live in a state of control are often exhausted, frustrated, and anxious. They push hard but feel like they're running in place. They make plans, but the plans keep falling apart. They try to hold everything together, yet still feel like something is slipping through the cracks. This isn't failure, it's feedback. It's life trying to redirect their energy from micromanagement to collaboration. Control cuts off intuition. It silences the signals that could lead to breakthroughs. It keeps you stuck in a loop of doing more, trying harder, and still feeling like it's never enough. That's because control is fueled by scarcity, the belief that unless you grip tightly, everything will slip away. Co-creation, in contrast, is fueled by abundance. It doesn't mean you sit back and do nothing. It means you do your part with clarity and commitment, while trusting life to do its part in return. It means being decisive without being desperate. It means moving forward even if the path isn't fully revealed, because you understand that clarity often comes through action, not before it. Co-creation is a dance. You initiate, and life responds. You listen, and life speaks. You align your inner state, and the outer world begins to mirror that alignment in unexpected and sometimes miraculous ways. Shifting from control to co-creation requires a fundamental change in perception. It demands that you see life not as something to be conquered, but as something you are in relationship with. Every obstacle becomes a message. Every delay becomes an invitation to pause and reflect. Every no becomes a redirection, not a rejection. This mindset shift frees you from the exhausting task of trying to predict and manage everything. It allows you to move through life with more ease, more presence, and more power, not because you're manipulating the world around you, but because you're finally moving in harmony with it. The ego often resists this shift. It wants certainty, it wants guarantees. It wants to know exactly what's going to happen and when. But the deeper truth is that most of life's most meaningful moments come unplanned. They arrive not through force but through flow. When you release the grip of control, you make space for magic. You create room for intuition to rise, for synchronicity to appear, for your steps to be guided by something wiser than logic alone. And in that space, you find not chaos, but clarity. You find that co-creation doesn't lead to less power, it leads to more. Because now, instead of pushing alone, you're working with the current. And the current always carries more than effort ever could. This is not about giving up goals or lowering standards. It's about shifting your approach. You still set intentions, you still take bold action, but you no longer demand that things happen in one specific way. You stay flexible, you stay tuned in, you become more interested in alignment than in control. And that shift changes everything. Your energy lightens, your mind clears, your body relaxes, and as you enter that receptive state, you start to notice how much more support is available to you than you ever realized. Resources show up, people appear, opportunities emerge. It all starts to flow, not because you forced it, but because you made room for it. Letting go of control doesn't mean losing direction. It means allowing space for better directions to reveal themselves. It means honoring your own rhythm, knowing that when your energy is aligned, life responds. It means remembering that you are not here to do this alone. You are here to partner with the unseen intelligence that knows your path, even when you doubt it. You were never meant to carry it all. You were meant to co-create. And once you remember that, you stop pushing, you stop chasing, and you begin to allow. And in that allowing, everything begins to move, not from pressure, but from power. Chapter 5. The power of this is happening for me. It is easy to feel at peace when everything is going your way, when doors open easily, when relationships flourish, when money flows in and your plans unfold without resistance. Gratitude feels natural. Confidence feels justified. You feel in sync with life, and your perception affirms the belief that things are working out. But what about the moments when nothing makes sense? What happens when the call doesn't come, the opportunity falls through, the relationship ends, or life delivers you an outcome you didn't expect or want? That's when your perception is truly tested. That's when the shift from fear to trust becomes more than just a concept. It becomes a practice. And one of the most powerful ways to anchor that practice is through the belief that, no matter what appears on the surface, this is happening for me. At first glance, this statement can feel unnatural or even ridiculous. How could a painful breakup, a job loss, an illness, or a financial setback be happening for your benefit? That question is valid, but it comes from the surface view, not the deeper one. To say, "This is happening for me," is not to deny the pain or frustration of a difficult moment. It is to declare that even within what seems like chaos or disappointment, there is something for you to learn, release, or become. It is the recognition that life isn't random and you are not being punished. You are being refined, redirected, or reawakened to something you might not yet be able to see. This mindset is not about being blindly positive. It is about being rooted in a deeper intelligence. You begin to trust that life is not against you and that there is a logic at play beyond your immediate understanding. Sometimes what feels like rejection is protection. Sometimes what feels like failure is redirection. Sometimes the thing that falls apart is the exact thing that needed to, in order to create space for something truer, more aligned, more lasting. You won't always see it in the moment, but over time, as you look back on those moments with distance and clarity, patterns begin to emerge. You see how the pieces fit together. You see how what you thought was the end was actually a necessary beginning. This shift in perception does not make you passive. It does not mean you stop setting goals, taking action, or making changes. It means you stop fighting what is. You stop resisting the present moment and start exploring what it might be offering. When you tell yourself that something is happening for you, you unlock a different line of questioning. You move from "why me" to "what now?" You begin to respond instead of react. You start to explore how you can grow from the experience instead of how you can escape it. That change in approach shifts your energy, and that shift in energy changes what happens next. Some of the most profound transformations come disguised as disappointment. Some of the most life-changing opportunities begin as disruption. The job you didn't get might push you to start the business you were meant to build. The person who left might create space for the relationship you truly need. The detour you were forced to take might introduce you to the very thing that sets your soul on fire. These connections are not always clear in the beginning, but when you adopt the belief that life is happening for you, you begin to look for the hidden gift, and in looking, you start to find it. The belief that life is for you creates resilience. It gives you the ability to stand inside uncertainty without collapsing. It allows you to face challenges with curiosity instead of panic. It strengthens your capacity to hold both the discomfort of the unknown and the faith that clarity will come. You stop needing immediate answers. You stop demanding certainty. You begin to accept that some answers arrive only through experience, and some lessons only make sense in hindsight. That acceptance creates peace. And from peace, you make better choices. From peace, you access your creativity, your intuition, your resourcefulness. This shift also changes how you see other people. When you believe life is happening for you, you stop seeing others as obstacles or threats. You recognize that even those who disappoint or hurt you may be playing a role in your growth. They may be reflecting something within you that's asking to be healed or released. This doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior. It means you extract wisdom from every encounter. You begin to move through the world with less bitterness and more discernment. You protect your peace not through avoidance, but through understanding. Ultimately, the statement, "This is happening for me," is a declaration of power. It is the decision to take ownership of your experience without falling into victimhood. It is the act of reclaiming your story from circumstances you cannot control. When you live with this belief, you become a different kind of person. You become someone who can thrive in uncertainty, who can find direction in difficulty, who can turn every chapter, no matter how unexpected, into a part of a bigger, better narrative. That's not naive. That's mastery. That's the power of perception fully activated, and it's available to you the moment you choose to trust the process, even when the process doesn't yet make sense. Chapter 6. Your inner story is the outer script. There is a story playing in your mind, often so quietly that you forget it's there. You carry it with you into every conversation, every decision, every challenge. It is not just a string of thoughts or memories. It is your internal narrative, the script that tells you who you are, what you're worth, what's possible for you, and what you should expect from life. Most people never realize how powerful this internal story is. They assume it's just how things are, when in truth it's just a pattern of perception. And until you examine that story and question whether it's still true or useful, it will continue to shape your external reality without your conscious permission. The inner story is formed early. Long before you have the ability to choose your beliefs, you absorb them from your environment. A single moment of rejection as a child can turn into a lifelong belief of unworthiness. One harsh comment from someone you admired might become the foundation of your self-doubt. Maybe you witness money being a constant source of stress, and you internalize the idea that wealth is difficult or dangerous. These moments get repeated, rehearsed, and reinforced until they become the story you tell yourself without even speaking. You act from it. You make choices through it. You unconsciously seek experiences that match it because your brain craves consistency more than it craves truth. That's the strange power of a belief. It doesn't have to be accurate. It only has to feel familiar. And once something becomes familiar, your mind begins to filter out anything that contradicts it. If your inner story says, "People always leave," you will notice every sign that supports that belief and ignore the signs of loyalty and love. If your story says, "I never get the break," you'll miss the subtle opportunities that require your participation. You will tell yourself, "See? It always happens this way," without realizing that the script you're following is based on an outdated version of you, one that's overdue for a rewrite. Changing your perception begins with confronting the story you've been carrying. This doesn't require blame or shame. It requires awareness. What do you consistently tell yourself when things go wrong? What explanation do you give for your patterns? What assumptions are you making about what's possible for you? The goal is not to judge yourself, but to observe with curiosity, because once you become aware of the story, you can start to change it. You can interrupt it in real time. You can respond with a new thought. You can remind yourself that the old story was built for survival, not success. And survival scripts often come with limits that no longer apply to the person you are becoming. There is no magical formula for rewriting your story. It happens in small, repeated choices. It begins by planting seeds of a new identity and reinforcing them with aligned behavior. Instead of saying, "I always mess things up," you start to say, "I'm learning how to handle things with more clarity." Instead of telling yourself, "I can't trust people," you start saying, "I'm learning to attract and receive trustworthy connections." You start saying, "I'm learning to attract and receive trustworthy connections." These aren't lies, they're declarations of transition. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're choosing to become someone your old story didn't account for. That is the heart of perception work. It is not about escaping your reality. It's about recreating it from the inside out. Language matters in this process. The words you use when you talk to yourself either reinforce the old story or build a new one. When you say things like, "I always," "I never," or "that's just how I am," you cement identity into habit. But when you use language that reflects growth, flexibility, and curiosity, you open space for transformation. You begin to relate to yourself as a dynamic being, not a fixed character. And in doing so, you give yourself permission to evolve. That permission is often all it takes to set a new perception in motion. What makes this shift so profound is that it changes not just how you see yourself, but how others see you. People respond to energy before they respond to words. When your inner story is one of confidence, possibility, and value, it radiates in your posture, your tone, your decisions. You no longer need to seek validation because you're not running a script that doubts your worth. You're no longer afraid to try because you don't expect failure as your default outcome. And when you do fall short, you don't collapse, you edit the story, you learn, and you keep moving. That's resilience, that's mastery. And it all starts with perception. Your life is constantly mirroring your belief system. If your reality feels stuck, small, or chaotic, look inward before you look outward. What story are you living by? What identity are you defending? What narrative are you repeating that no longer fits? And what new story could you begin to tell? One that honors your past but isn't confined by it. When you answer those questions honestly, you will discover that the story was never set in stone. It was only being rehearsed. And the moment you change the script, the world begins to shift with you. Not because everything outside you changed overnight, but because your perception evolved. And perception always directs the plot. Chapter 7. Gratitude as a frequency shifter. There is a reason why people who practice gratitude seem lighter, more magnetic, more open to life. It is not because they are blind to problems or immune to pain. It is because they have trained themselves to see through a different lens, to detect beauty even in the midst of struggle, and to recognize the presence of something good before it becomes obvious. Gratitude is often misunderstood as a simple act of politeness or a soft emotional response to favorable conditions. But at its core, gratitude is a frequency, a deliberate tuning of your inner state to match the energy of abundance. And like any frequency, it attracts more of what matches it. Most people wait to feel grateful until something good enough happens. They hold their gratitude hostage to conditions, assuming that only when life improves can they allow themselves to feel appreciation. But this mindset reverses the flow of creation. It places power in the hands of circumstances rather than perception. The truth is, gratitude is not a reaction. It is a generator. It is a proactive signal that tells life, I see what's working, and I am ready to receive more. When you begin to live from that place, not in denial of difficulty, but in full awareness of possibility, you shift your entire emotional and energetic state. And when your energy shifts, so does your experience. Gratitude sharpens your perception by focusing your attention on what is present, not what is missing. It breaks the habit of scanning for threats, losses, or unmet desires and instead guides your awareness to what is here, now, supporting you. In a culture obsessed with chasing what's next, this presence is powerful. When you can genuinely feel gratitude for what you already have, your breath, your body, your lessons, your strength, you begin to emit the frequency of sufficiency. That doesn't mean you don't desire more. It means you are no longer rooted in the energy of lack. And abundance never flows to those who believe they are empty. It flows to those who know they are already full, even as they reach for more. It is easy to be grateful when things go right, when goals are met, and when everything falls into place. But the real transformation happens when you can access gratitude in the in-between spaces, in the waiting, in the uncertainty, and the challenge that hasn't yet resolved. This is where perception becomes a choice. In those moments, gratitude becomes an act of courage, a signal of trust, a declaration that you are choosing to see life as benevolent, even when it's not obvious. That choice elevates you. It lifts your emotional baseline. It creates an inner resilience that cannot be easily shaken, because when your gratitude is no longer conditional, your joy is no longer fragile. Gratitude also acts as a natural amplifier. Whatever you focus on with appreciation tends to grow. If you focus on what's working, you'll begin to notice more of it. If you focus on the qualities you value in someone, those qualities become more visible. If you look for what's unfolding in your favor, you will see evidence where others see chaos. This isn't delusion, it's alignment. You are aligning your perception with the frequency of favor, and in doing so you are influencing how life meets you. It doesn't mean you won't face difficulty, but it does mean you'll face it from a higher place, and when your baseline energy is elevated, solutions tend to appear faster, connections flow more easily, and clarity arrives with less effort. There is a profound intelligence in gratitude. It quiets the noise of comparison and competition. It softens the urge to prove or push. It allows you to feel complete in the moment while still moving forward with vision and ambition. This is not complacency, it is creative power rooted in presence. From this space, you take action, not to fix what's broken, but to expand what's already thriving. That subtle shift in motive changes the quality of your work, your relationships, and your outcome. People can feel the difference. Life can feel the difference. You become a source of momentum rather than tension, of clarity rather than confusion. To make gratitude a way of being rather than a fleeting feeling, it must become a practice, not a forced ritual or hollow list-making, but a sincere engagement with what is real. Start by noticing one thing each day that supports you. It could be a quiet moment, a kind word, a small solution to a lingering problem. Let that noticing be enough. Let it ground you. Over time, this simple practice builds a new perceptual habit. Your brain, always rewiring based on repetition and emotion, begins to default to appreciation instead of complaint. And as this new wiring sets in, the frequency of your entire life begins to rise. Gratitude won't make life perfect, but it will make your perception more powerful. It won't eliminate every challenge, but it will reveal strength and support you didn't realize were already present. It is a reminder in every moment that you are never as far from peace as it seems. Because peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of perspective. And gratitude is the quickest way to access that presence. When you choose it again and again, not as a performance but as a way of seeing, you begin to notice the flow that has been there all along. You stop waiting for something external to shift your mood. You become the shift. And from that place, everything begins to meet you differently. Chapter 8. Anchor into abundance daily. Living from an abundance mindset is not a one-time decision. It is a daily discipline, a practiced perception, and a moment-by-moment commitment to align with a truth deeper than fear, deeper than lack, and deeper than doubt. You are surrounded by abundance in more ways than you've been taught to recognize. But if your attention has been trained to focus on what's missing, that abundance can remain invisible. To shift from scarcity to sufficiency, you have to anchor yourself in the energy of abundance every single day, not just when things are going well, but especially when uncertainty creeps in. This is not about pretending life is perfect. It is about deciding which lens will dominate your attention and ultimately shape your experience. Abundance is not just a bank balance, a job title, or the things you own. It is a state of being. It is a way of interpreting life that assumes there is always more on the way, more opportunities, more love, more clarity, more connection. Scarcity whispers that you're running out of time, that you've missed your chance, that you're falling behind. Abundance calmly reminds you that your path is unfolding, that your timing is your own, and that what is meant for you cannot be taken from you. When you anchor into this mindset, you stop reacting from panic and start responding from power. You stop chasing what you think you lack and start aligning with what already wants to meet you. Anchoring into abundance daily means creating small rituals and consistent practices that reset your perception. These are not just motivational routines, they are perceptual recalibrations. Every morning you wake up, you are given the choice to lean into lack or lean into trust. One path leads to pressure, the other to flow. One path tightens your energy, the other opens it. When you start your day with intention, whether through gratitude, meditation, movement, or even a few moments of silence, you begin to take authorship of your inner environment. And when you control the energy you bring, you influence the energy you receive. Most people begin their day in reaction. They reach for their phones, scroll through other people's lives, absorb headlines designed to provoke fear, and unknowingly anchor themselves into anxiety before they've even taken a conscious breath. From that state, it becomes nearly impossible to recognize the abundance that is already present. The mind becomes fixated on what is wrong, what is missing, or what needs fixing. But when you begin your day by anchoring into what is already working, what is already supportive, available, and unfolding, you prime your perception to notice more of it throughout the day. This is not spiritual fluff. It is neurological truth. The reticular activating system in your brain filters information based on what you focus on. And when you focus on abundance, you start to perceive it more frequently. Anchoring into abundance is not only about what you do in the morning, it's about how you check in with yourself throughout the day. When stress rises, when doubt creeps in, when plans shift unexpectedly, you can pause, breathe, and ask a better question. Instead of, "What's going wrong?" ask, "What's trying to align?" Instead of spiraling into frustration, remind yourself that something greater might be taking shape behind the scenes. This is not naivety, it is mastery. It's the choice to remain centered in the middle of change, and the more you choose that center, the more powerful it becomes. It also helps to surround yourself with reminders. The people you talk to, the content you consume, the words you speak to yourself, all of it either reinforces abundance or scarcity. If you are constantly exposed to fear-driven conversations, comparison, or pessimism, your mindset will unconsciously contract. But when you curate your environment intentionally, choosing voices and influences that remind you of your power, your vision, and your worth, you create fertile ground for abundance to grow. You cannot always control your circumstances, but you can control your inner ecosystem. That control is where freedom lives. Anchoring into abundance also means celebrating evidence of it, no matter how small. A compliment, an unexpected opportunity, a kind gesture, a peaceful moment. These are all signs of alignment. When you acknowledge them, you build momentum. When you overlook them, you reinforce the belief that nothing is working. Every time you say, "This is a sign that things are moving," you strengthen the perception that life is flowing in your favor. And as that perception strengthens, your actions shift. You become more open, more present, more willing to take bold steps. You begin to lead with trust instead of fear, and that shift changes your outcomes. This is not about being high energy all the time or pretending you're never discouraged. It's about having a reliable place to return to. When you anchor into abundance daily, you create a safe emotional and mental home base. You give yourself a place to land when life feels chaotic, and from that grounded place you can navigate anything, not because the world becomes easier, but because you become stronger, calmer, and more aligned. The external world may still challenge you, but your internal compass remains steady. Abundance is not just something to be attracted, it is something to be practiced, and the practice begins within. It begins in the quiet moments, the small choices, the subtle shifts of attention. It begins when you decide that your energy is your responsibility and your perception is your greatest power. When you anchor into that truth consistently, life meets you with more of what reflects it. The abundance was never missing. It was only waiting for your perception to tune in and receive it. Chapter 9. Welcome contrast, invite growth. Contrast is an inevitable part of life. It comes in the form of discomfort, disruption, disappointment, or even conflict. It often shows up when you least expect it, when things seem to be moving smoothly, or just as you begin to build momentum. Most people see contrast as a problem, something to be fixed, avoided, or eliminated as quickly as possible. But contrast is not here to block your growth. It is here to spark it. When you shift your perception of contrast, you begin to see it not as opposition, but as invitation. Not as a sign that things are going wrong, but as a signal that something new is trying to emerge through you. Every time you feel resistance, it's a sign that you've reached the edge of your current identity, your current mindset, or your current capacity. It's life nudging you forward, asking you to expand, evolve, or release something that no longer serves where you're going. But instead of embracing that nudge, most people retreat. They interpret the discomfort as failure, or take the interruption personally, as if life is punishing them. That reaction is understandable, especially if you've been taught that ease equals success and struggle means you're doing something wrong. But the deeper truth is that growth is often disguised as friction. What you interpret as a breakdown is usually the beginning of a breakthrough. Think of contrast as a mirror. It reflects where your inner world and outer reality are out of alignment. When you encounter situations that feel limiting, draining, or misaligned, they are often showing you where your beliefs, expectations, or choices need to shift. If you find yourself in constant conflict with others, the contrast may be pointing you toward boundaries, communication, or self-worth. If you keep hitting roadblocks in a particular area of life, the contrast may be asking you to approach it differently, to surrender control, or to upgrade the way you see yourself. In every case, contrast carries intelligence. The question is whether you will resist it or receive it. Welcoming contrast does not mean you enjoy pain or chase discomfort. It means you stop running from it. You start looking beneath the surface. You begin to trust that life is not throwing you off course, but rather offering you a deeper understanding of where you are, who you are becoming, and what still needs your attention. This perspective changes the way you move through challenge. Instead of collapsing into self-doubt or frustration, you lean in with curiosity. You ask, "What is this here to show me?" Or, "What strength is being called out of me right now?" Those questions shift your energy, and when your energy shifts, your experience starts to shift with it. Every person who has grown beyond their limitations has walked through contrast. It is the universal teacher. It sharpens your clarity, it deepens your commitment, it exposes your unconscious patterns and invites you to respond with new awareness. You do not grow from perfection, you grow from contrast. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a punishment, it's the space where transformation lives. And when you start to embrace that space instead of fearing it, you begin to access levels of resilience and wisdom that you never knew you had. Contrast also amplifies desire. When you experience what you don't want, it helps you become clearer about what you do want. A difficult job makes you crave meaningful work. A toxic relationship helps you recognize the value of respect and emotional safety. A season of scarcity reveals how much you value security and flow. In this way, contrast becomes creative. It activates a vision within you that might have stayed dormant without the pressure of discontent. Without contrast, you may never have been pushed to imagine more, ask for more, or rise to meet the version of yourself that can receive more. To work with contrast instead of fighting it, you must shift from judgment to observation. Instead of labeling something as bad or wrong, observe what it is revealing. Let it inform you. Let it refine you. Let it make you more intentional, more aware, more grounded in what truly matters. When you do this consistently, you begin to see contrast as a normal, even necessary part of your expansion. You stop being thrown off by difficulty. You start using it. You stop fearing the next challenge. You begin to welcome the opportunity it brings. This mindset does not make you passive. It makes you powerful. You are no longer reacting emotionally to every disruption. You are responding with clarity and purpose. You are no longer attaching your worth to how smooth or chaotic your life appears at any given moment. You understand that every step forward requires some friction, and every new level of awareness is preceded by a moment of contrast. And because you trust the process, you move through the discomfort faster. You bounce back quicker. You integrate the lesson instead of repeating the pattern. When you welcome contrast, you become unstoppable. You stop waiting for perfect conditions and start creating from whatever space you're in. You start choosing perception over panic. You begin to view life through the lens of growth, not just gratification. And that changes everything. The same event that used to derail you now deepens you. The same situation that once triggered fear now calls forth strength. That is what it means to shift your perception. It is not the end of difficulty, it is the end of your resistance to the growth it brings. Contrast does not mean you are off track. It means you are in the process of aligning more deeply with what you've asked for. And when you stop resisting that alignment, life begins to respond with clarity, flow, and favor. Chapter 10. Stop taking score too soon. There is a tendency in human nature to evaluate progress prematurely. When results don't show up quickly, when outcomes don't match effort right away, the mind begins to panic. It rushes to judgment, declaring that nothing is working, that all effort is wasted, that failure is inevitable. This tendency comes from a culture of instant gratification, where waiting is often equated with weakness and where visible success is expected to appear as quickly as it is desired. But transformation doesn't operate on your preferred timeline. Life unfolds in layers, not on demand. And when you take score too soon, you often walk away from something just before it starts to work. The truth is, most growth happens in invisible ways before it becomes measurable. A seed takes time to sprout. Muscles strengthen in micro-movements before change is seen. Emotional healing begins in quiet shifts before your circumstances reflect your progress. There is always more happening beneath the surface than you realize. Just because something isn't visible yet doesn't mean it isn't real. Just because you haven't arrived doesn't mean you're lost. The need to constantly assess and prove that progress is happening can actually interfere with the process itself. It keeps you focused on outcome rather than alignment, and that shift in focus can cause unnecessary frustration. Taking score too soon is a habit rooted in insecurity. It's a way of asking, "Am I doing this right? Is this worth it?" Instead of trusting that your effort, your energy, and your intention are already moving you forward. It reveals a fear that perhaps life won't deliver, that maybe the change you seek isn't coming. But that fear, when indulged, closes the channel. It causes you to doubt the very path you're meant to walk. It invites hesitation, self-sabotage, and inconsistency. What was once a clear direction becomes clouded with second-guessing. And when you're caught in that fog, even the right move can feel wrong. There is a different way to live, one that doesn't require constant validation from results. It begins with understanding that your job is to align, to act, and to trust. Life's job is to respond in its own time, in its own way. When you release the compulsive need to measure progress every step of the way, you create space for momentum to build. You allow for gestation, for timing, for alignment to settle in before results reveal themselves. You stop digging up the seed every day to see if it's growing, and instead you water it, nurture it, and let it do what it's designed to do. Faith is not just believing that things will happen. It is the discipline of remaining grounded and committed when there is no visible evidence that they are. This is where your perception becomes your most powerful tool. If you see a delay as failure, you'll shrink. If you see it as part of the process, you'll expand. If you take score too soon, you'll quit early. But if you trust the timing of your life, you'll develop the patience required to see it through. And that patience is not passive. It is an active, grounded energy that allows you to keep showing up, keep creating, keep moving, even when the external hasn't caught up to the internal yet. Every meaningful shift in life has a gestation period. Whether it's building a business, healing your body, reshaping your mindset, or cultivating a new relationship with money, time is always part of the equation. But time alone doesn't create change. Consistency does. And consistency only becomes sustainable when you stop obsessing over immediate results. You're not here to chase outcomes. You're here to become the kind of person who lives in alignment with what you desire. And when you embody that version of yourself through action, mindset, energy, and expectation, the results become inevitable. Taking score too soon also reveals a misunderstanding about what success actually is. Success isn't just the arrival point. It's the process of becoming more aware, more aligned, more intentional. It's about growing into the capacity to receive and hold what you've asked for. If it hasn't arrived yet, that doesn't mean you failed. It may simply mean you are still becoming the version of yourself who is ready to receive it fully. And if you trust that, you stop needing external confirmation every step of the way. You stop measuring your worth by temporary outcomes. You start building from within. The most transformative moments often come after a long stretch of silence, where nothing seems to be shifting, but everything is quietly preparing to. If you take score in the silence, you may miss the breakthrough. You may quit too early, lower your standards, or change course unnecessarily. But if you stay the course, if you hold your perception steady, you'll eventually see that the silence wasn't empty. It was full of unseen movement, alignment, preparation. And when the shift arrives, it won't be subtle, it will be undeniable. But it will only be visible to the one who had the patience to wait and the perception to keep believing. So stop checking the scoreboard every 5 minutes. Stop looking for proof that you're almost there. Stop asking for signs that it's all working, and start becoming the person who knows it is, regardless of what's visible. Because the moment you stop taking score too soon is the moment you start playing for the long game. And in the long game, those who persist in faith always see results that exceed what they once thought possible. Chapter 11. Decide it's already working. There is a distinct difference between hoping things will work out and deciding they already are. Hope often waits passively, watching and wondering, tied to external proof to feel safe. Decision, on the other hand, is active, grounded, and rooted in trust. It doesn't rely on conditions to confirm its stance. It generates energy, and that energy shapes outcomes. When you decide something is working, before the results, before the signs, before the applause, you step into a very different frequency. You are no longer trying to manifest from desperation or impatience. You are moving with conviction. That shift in perception is powerful enough to change the direction of your entire life. Deciding that something is already working does not mean ignoring obstacles or pretending that everything is easy. It means choosing the lens through which you interpret what's unfolding. It means you view the delay not as denial, but as divine timing. It means you experience resistance not as rejection, but as redirection. It means you stop asking for constant reassurance and start offering your own. The moment you make that decision, you stop leaking energy. You stop entertaining doubt every time a moment of uncertainty arises. You begin to embody the energy of alignment, and that embodiment sends a clear signal to life itself. Your perception creates feedback. When you waver, life wavers. When you hold a firm internal posture that says, "I know this is working," life begins to organize around that clarity. You attract people, opportunities, and solutions that resonate with the certainty you are living in. This is not mystical thinking. It is energetic consistency. People are drawn to confidence. Circumstances respond to commitment. Resources meet those who move with intention. The ones who seem to live in flow are often those who simply made an inner decision long before the outer proof arrived. They made peace with the process. They stopped negotiating with fear. They decided. There is an invisible cost to indecision. It drains your momentum. It clouds your clarity. It makes even simple steps feel heavy. When you are constantly oscillating between belief and doubt, you lose traction. You hesitate, you overthink, you second-guess your actions and dilute your impact. But when you decide, your energy becomes clean. You move with purpose. You act with trust. Not because everything is guaranteed, but because you know that indecision is the real threat. Not failure, not detours, not challenges, but the paralysis that comes from needing everything to make sense before you commit. Life doesn't require you to be perfect. It requires you to be committed. Deciding it's already working also changes how you show up. You no longer need to manipulate or perform. You no longer operate from scarcity or urgency. You trust that your energy is doing half the work, and your actions, when taken from a place of clarity, are amplified. This doesn't mean you never adjust your strategy or refine your approach. It means your core belief doesn't waver. It means you are rooted in your vision, not ruled by your circumstances. And from that grounded place, you have more creativity, more stamina, and more intuitive access to the next step. The truth is, many people are just one decision away from the momentum they've been chasing, not a decision about what to do, but a decision about how to see what they're already doing. When you decide that it's working, you stop reacting to every hiccup as a disaster. You stop abandoning your vision every time the evidence doesn't match your expectation. You stay steady, and that steadiness begins to compound. Your inner world becomes less chaotic. Your outer actions become more potent. The gap between intention and manifestation starts to shrink, not because life suddenly changes, but because you did. This decision also reclaims your power. When you wait for external validation to believe you're on the right path, you become a servant to your circumstances. But when you declare it's already working, you become the authority. You become the one shaping the experience instead of reacting to it. That choice shifts your nervous system out of survival mode. It calms the inner dialogue that says you're running out of time or missing your shot. You breathe deeper. You move slower with more focus. And, ironically, that calm presence accelerates results far more than frantic effort ever could. The most successful people you know have made peace with the unknown. They do not operate with perfect knowledge or constant reassurance. They simply made a decision and then kept showing up for it. Their clarity became their magnetism. Their consistency became their momentum. You have the same power, but it begins with a perceptual commitment, a non-negotiable decision that what you're building, becoming, or healing is already in motion, not because the signs say so, but because your belief does. You can wait for life to prove it, or you can decide it's already happening. That decision will change your energy. That energy will change your behavior. That behavior will shape your outcomes. The power of perception is not just in what you see, but in how you choose to see it. And when you decide that things are unfolding in your favor, they often begin to do just that. Not because the world changed overnight, but because you finally stopped waiting and started walking as if it was already true. And when you do that long enough, it becomes more than a belief. It becomes your reality. Chapter 12. The Miracle of Mindful Momentum. Momentum is one of the most underestimated forces in personal transformation. It has a quiet power, a subtle rhythm, and a compound effect that most people overlook. Everyone wants the big breakthrough, the instant shift, the overnight success. But the truth is, real change often begins not with a giant leap, but with a single decision, followed by a consistent series of small, aligned action. When you begin to move with intention, even in the smallest of ways, you activate something bigger than effort. You awaken momentum. And momentum, once initiated, begins to carry you further than you imagined, not through force, but through flow. The challenge is that most people wait to feel inspired before they take action. They believe motivation must come first, that they need to feel ready, confident, or certain before they move. But perception precedes feeling. Action often generates the emotion you're waiting for. Confidence is not a prerequisite to action. It is a result of it. Clarity does not always come before the step. It often arrives after. This is where mindful momentum becomes a transformational tool. It is the decision to move forward with presence, to take the next step with awareness, and to trust that progress is happening even when it isn't loud or dramatic. Mindfulness is what keeps momentum clean. Without it, momentum can become manic, driven by fear, urgency, or the need to prove something. That kind of momentum exhausts you, distracts you, and eventually burns you out. But mindful momentum is rooted. It is deliberate. It is driven by intention, not pressure. You don't rush because you're scared. You move steadily because you're aligned. You don't need external validation every step of the way. You trust the process, knowing that each aligned action carries exponential weight, even when results are not immediate. You know you are building something that has depth, something that lasts. Perception plays a key role in this process. When you believe that small actions are insignificant, you sabotage momentum. When you dismiss the little wins or overlook the subtle progress, you deny yourself the satisfaction and reinforcement that fuels consistency. But when you shift your lens to see every step as meaningful, every effort as cumulative, you begin to feel empowered rather than exhausted. You realize that one conversation, one journal entry, one workout, one moment of courage, when repeated consistently, has the power to change the entire trajectory of your life. You stop looking for the one perfect move and start honoring the practice of showing up. Momentum is not just physical, it is emotional, mental, and energetic. When you start choosing peace instead of panic, gratitude instead of complaint, or possibility instead of doubt, you generate emotional momentum. When you begin redirecting your thoughts from what could go wrong to what might be unfolding in your favor, you create mental momentum. When you hold a consistent frequency of trust, worthiness, and openness, you create energetic momentum. And when all three align, your outer world begins to mirror that internal shift in powerful and often unexpected ways. There will be days when momentum feels invisible, days when the effort feels heavy and the progress feels minimal. These are the most important days to stay the course. These are the moments that test your perception, your commitment, and your willingness to trust the unseen. Anyone can take action when the path is clear and the feedback is instant, but those who master momentum understand that the most powerful movement often happens in silence. The breakthrough is usually preceded by a long stretch of invisible groundwork, and the ones who experience it are those who didn't need constant proof to keep going. Mindful momentum also means giving yourself permission to recalibrate. You don't have to keep doing something the same way just because you started that way. Flexibility is not a lack of discipline, it is a sign of presence. When you are mindful, you remain tuned in. You recognize when your energy shifts, when your environment changes, and when it's time to adjust your approach. That responsiveness keeps momentum alive. Stubbornness rooted in fear kills it. You don't need to force your way forward, you need to stay present, stay aware, and keep choosing the next best aligned step. Eventually, momentum takes over. What once required conscious effort becomes natural. The actions that felt awkward become automatic. Your perception catches up to your new identity. You no longer have to talk yourself into the work, it becomes who you are. That's when the magic happens. Not because something outside of you suddenly changed, but because your consistency gave birth to ease. Your perception shifted from effort to embodiment. In the same actions that once felt hard, now feel like home. This is the miracle of mindful momentum. It doesn't ask you to do more, it asks you to do what matters consistently with awareness. It invites you to stop measuring your life by intensity and start measuring it by integrity. It reminds you that perception is not a fleeting thought, it is a practice, reinforced every time you choose trust over doubt, movement over stagnation, and presence over pressure. When you live from that space, you become unstoppable, not because you're rushing, but because you're in rhythm. And that rhythm becomes the pulse of your new reality, one step, one breath, one aligned action at a time. Chapter 13. Detach to receive. Attachment is often mistaken for commitment. The more tightly we hold on, the more serious we must be, the more deserving we appear. That is the belief many people carry without realizing that what they are actually doing is suffocating their desires, not nurturing them. Detachment is not disinterest. It is not passivity or giving up. It is the art of loosening your emotional grip on the outcome, so that what you want has space to arrive without being choked by your need for control. Detachment allows the energy to move. It invites the process to unfold naturally. It creates room for timing, flow, and unseen opportunities to reach you in ways you never could have orchestrated on your own. When you become attached to how something should happen, when it should happen, or who it should come through, you narrow your perception. You begin to filter out everything that doesn't match your rigid expectations. You ignore signs that things might be working in your favor in a different form. You miss subtle opportunities because you are too focused on what you've decided it must look like. Attachment turns your vision into a tunnel. Detachment widens your view. It allows you to recognize that the universe might deliver your desire in a way that exceeds your imagination, but only if you're open enough to see it. Detachment is rooted in trust. It says, I've done my part, and now I'm allowing life to do its part. It's the willingness to believe that once the seed is planted, you don't need to dig it up and check its progress every hour. You water it, give it sunlight, and let nature handle the rest. Most people struggle with this because they confuse effort with control. They believe the more mental energy they pour into something, the faster it will happen. But often, that excess energy is anxiety, not alignment. It's tension disguised as productivity, and tension blocks flow. When you are energetically desperate for something to happen, you create resistance. That resistance delays what you are trying to attract. The power of detachment lies in your ability to feel whole before the result appears. It's the inner knowing that you are still complete even without the confirmation you crave. When you embody this level of self-trust, you become magnetic. People, ideas, and resources are drawn to that steady energy. There is nothing more attractive than someone who moves with quiet certainty, who walks forward without chasing, who acts from clarity rather than compulsion. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you do the work, set the vision, and then step back with open hands, letting go of the need to manipulate the outcome. This is not an excuse to become passive. In fact, detachment often leads to more inspired action because you're no longer weighed down by emotional turbulence. When you're detached, you can hear your intuition more clearly. You can feel the natural rhythm of when to move and when to rest. You stop trying to force timing and instead become more responsive to what life is presenting right now. Detachment connects you to presence, and presence is the space where clarity lives. From presence, you make decisions rooted in alignment, not anxiety. You say yes to what resonates and no to what doesn't, without the fear that you're missing out or falling behind. Detachment also helps you recover faster when things don't go the way you expected. Instead of spiraling into disappointment or self-doubt, you remember that one closed door does not mean the path is blocked. It just means there is another route, perhaps a better one. You don't see the outcome as a personal failure. You see it as information. This mindset keeps you nimble. It helps you pivot with grace instead of collapsing into frustration. When you're not attached, you can adapt. And when you can adapt, you stay in motion. You remain open to the next opportunity, the next idea, the next chapter that's already on its way. Detachment is a practice, not a one-time choice. It's something you return to again and again, especially when your ego wants to take control. It's the discipline of reminding yourself that you are not the sole architect of your life. You are a co-creator. And co-creation requires collaboration with something beyond your logic. It asks you to trust the unseen, to honor divine timing, and to let your life unfold without needing to control every detail. This is not easy, especially if you've been taught that control equals safety. But true safety comes from inner stability, not external guarantees. The more you practice detachment, the more peace you create. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything going your way, but the kind of peace that remains even when it doesn't. That inner peace becomes your foundation. From it, you can pursue your vision with joy rather than pressure. You can enjoy the journey instead of anxiously chasing the destination. And as your energy becomes more grounded and relaxed, what you desire begins to move toward you with less resistance. You become a match for it not just in thought, but in frequency. You stop signaling lack and start radiating trust. And in that state, receiving becomes inevitable. Not because you forced it, but because you let it come. Chapter 14. Surround Sound. Elevate the voices around you. The people and environments you immerse yourself in shape your perception more than you realize. Your mind is always absorbing energy, attitudes, and narratives from those around you. Every conversation, every opinion, every subtle expression of belief leaves an imprint. It can either expand you or contract you. If you are surrounded by voices that constantly point out what's wrong, voices that dwell on fear, scarcity, and limitation, your own thinking will begin to echo that energy. It doesn't matter how disciplined you are, prolonged exposure to negative input eventually seeps into your subconscious and starts influencing how you see yourself and your possibilities. Your environment is not neutral. It is either pulling you forward or pulling you back. If you're trying to cultivate an abundance mindset, but you keep surrounding yourself with people who only see obstacles, who complain, who reinforce doubt, it becomes like swimming against a current. You might make progress, but it will be slow and exhausting. On the other hand, if you surround yourself with people who believe in growth, who see potential, who speak possibility into their own lives and yours, your progress accelerates almost effortlessly. You rise to meet the energy you're immersed in. This is why being intentional about your surroundings is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Elevating the voices around you doesn't always mean cutting everyone off. It means becoming conscious of what you allow to influence you. It means deciding who gets to speak into your vision and who doesn't. Some people mean well but can't see beyond their own limitations. They might love you, but they project their fears onto you. They'll say things like, "Be careful, that's risky," or "People like us don't get opportunities like that." If you accept those voices without question, they become part of your internal dialogue. And once a belief takes root inside you, it starts shaping your actions and your outcomes. Protecting your energy means being discerning about which voices you allow to take root. There is also the matter of self-talk, which is the loudest voice you'll ever hear. You can be surrounded by supportive people, but if your own voice is filled with doubt and criticism, it will overpower everything else. Your perception of yourself sets the tone for how you engage with the world. This is why it's not enough to elevate external voices. You must also elevate your inner one. You have to catch yourself when you speak words of limitation or self-sabotage and replace them with words that reinforce your worth, your capability, and your vision. Over time, that inner dialogue becomes a kind of mental surround sound that influences everything you do. The content you consume is another form of surrounding energy. Social media, news, entertainment, books, and podcasts all feed your mind. They either amplify a mindset of possibility or reinforce narratives of fear and limitation. Many people consume negativity without even realizing it, scrolling through endless stories of drama, criticism, or comparison, then wonder why they feel anxious or unmotivated. What you feed your mind becomes what you expect from life. If you want to see abundance, you have to immerse yourself in ideas, stories, and voices that reflect it. You have to be as intentional with your mental diet as you are with your physical one. One of the fastest ways to shift your perception is to elevate the conversations you have. Instead of talking about problems, talk about ideas. Instead of replaying what went wrong, explore what could go right. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to think bigger, not because they are pushing you, but because they believe in your potential. When you hear possibility spoken often enough, it becomes part of your subconscious programming. It becomes natural to see opportunities instead of obstacles, to look for solutions instead of excuses, to move forward instead of hesitating. This does not mean that everyone in your life will share your vision or understand your path. It means you have to decide who gets to influence your perception and how much. You can love people and still limit how much access they have to your energy. You can care for others without allowing their fear to dictate your choices. This is not about isolation. It's about elevation. The more you curate your environment to reflect the mindset you are building, the easier it becomes to maintain that mindset when challenges arise. As you elevate the voices around you, you'll also find that your own voice starts to shift. You become someone who speaks encouragement, who inspires others, who holds a vision that lifts those around you. This creates a ripple effect. When you raise your own frequency, you influence the environment just as much as it influences you. Your energy becomes contagious, and suddenly, you are not just consuming positivity, you are creating it. Surrounding yourself with the right voices is not a one-time decision but an ongoing practice. It means consistently asking my ethics, is this conversation feeding my vision or draining it? Is this environment supporting my growth or keeping me small? The answers to those questions determine not just the quality of your perception, but the trajectory of your life. When you align your environment with the future you're creating, your perception stays clear, your energy remains strong, and your path forward unfolds with more ease than you once believed possible. Chapter 15. Become the proof. There is a moment on the journey of shifting your perception when you realize that it's no longer about theory, no longer about affirmations or journaling or reading words that inspire you. It becomes about embodiment. It becomes about showing up as the living proof of the beliefs you claim to hold. It is one thing to say you believe life is working in your favor, that abundance is available, that your mindset shapes your reality. It is another thing entirely to walk through your days as if those truths are already active and reflected in your behavior, your presence, and your decisions. Becoming the proof is not about performance. It is about alignment. It is about living so rooted in your perception of favor and flow that it becomes undeniable not just to others, but to yourself. Too often people wait for results before they allow themselves to feel confident or certain. They wait for external evidence before they grant themselves the energy of success. But your life begins to shift the moment you reverse that dynamic. Instead of needing to see it to believe it, you choose to believe it until you see it. That belief then influences how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you respond, how you lead. You stop outsourcing your confidence and start generating it from within. You become the example of what you once only hoped was possible. You stop quoting others and start living your own truth so fully that your life becomes the message. Becoming the proof requires a steady commitment to integrity, not in the moralistic sense, but in the energetic one. It means your inner world and outer actions are congruent. It means you are not saying one thing and doing another. It means that the way you think, speak, and act is in harmony with the perception you've chosen to live by. If you say you believe in abundance, then you do not speak as if there is never enough. If you say you believe you are worthy of love, you stop accepting relationships that diminish you. If you say you trust the timing of your life, then you stop panicking every time something takes longer than expected. These choices are not always comfortable, but they are powerful. They anchor your perception in reality. When you become the proof, you no longer need to convince anyone of your path. You are not begging others to see your vision or validate your progress. You are not explaining yourself endlessly. You are simply living it. And in that quiet confidence, people begin to notice. They sense something different. They ask questions. They feel the energy shift when they are around you. That's the power of aligned perception. It's not loud, but it is unmistakable. It doesn't try to persuade. It inspires through presence. And it does not rely on perfection. It relies on authenticity and consistency. This shift also means you stop waiting for the right circumstances before you step into the version of yourself you're becoming. You don't need more money, a better title, or perfect conditions to show up with excellence. You bring that energy to everything you do, regardless of how big or small the task may be. You treat the current moment as worthy of your full attention. You speak your vision aloud, even when no one else can see it yet. You celebrate progress that others overlook. You keep promises to yourself, even when no one is watching. These are the invisible steps that build the visible results. These are the moments where you prove to yourself that you are already living in alignment with the reality you are calling in. Becoming the proof also allows you to lead by example. People don't shift because you tell them to. They shift because they see what's possible through you. You become the evidence that perception creates power. You become the reminder that peace is available even in chaos, that clarity is accessible even in uncertainty, that expansion is always possible when you are willing to see things differently. This influence doesn't require a stage or a platform. It requires presence. It requires the courage to live your life fully, to own your path without apology, to trust that your embodiment is enough to light the way for others. This path is not about arriving at some flawless destination. It's about committing to the daily practice of living as if what you believe is already true. It's about walking through your life with intention, treating every moment as an opportunity to practice alignment. It's about being honest with yourself when your actions drift out of sync with your vision, and gently bringing yourself back, again and again. Over time, this practice becomes natural. You no longer have to force it. You no longer have to try to be the proof, you simply are. When your perception becomes your foundation and your behavior becomes the embodiment of that perception, you start to experience a reality that matches your inner world. Life reflects your clarity. Circumstances rise to meet your conviction. Opportunities respond to your energy. And in this space, there is nothing to chase. There is only alignment, and in alignment, everything begins to flow. You don't have to say much. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't even need others to understand you. You've become the proof, and that is more powerful than any explanation could ever be. Chapter 16. The Flow State Life. There is a rhythm available to everyone, a natural current that, when aligned with, brings ease, clarity, and creative power. It is not reserved for the lucky or the enlightened. It is not a mystical gift granted only to a chosen few. This rhythm is what many call flow, and it is accessible the moment you stop forcing, start trusting, and allow yourself to move in harmony with the intelligence of life itself. The flow state is not simply a mental zone where things click and time disappears. It is a way of living, where your inner world is synchronized with your external actions, where your perception is clear and your choices are aligned. The flow state life is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of deep coherence. Living in flow does not mean everything always feels easy, but it does mean you're no longer pushing against the current of your own resistance. It means you're tuned in to what matters, focused on what energizes you, and responsive to what life presents rather than obsessed with controlling it. Flow begins when you stop trying to force outcomes and start trusting your readiness, your path, and your inner guidance. You do not need to have everything figured out to live in flow. You only need to be present, aware, and willing to follow what feels true, even if it challenges your comfort. The greatest barrier to flow is overthinking. When the mind is cluttered with fear, second-guessing, or the need to be perfect, it blocks access to your natural intelligence. Flow cannot be accessed through analysis alone. It arises through presence. It emerges when you stop trying to solve everything with your head and start listening to your instincts, your body, your energy. It's the moment you realize that ease is not laziness and effort is not always evidence of alignment. In flow, action still happens, but it is guided, not forced. It is meaningful, not manic. You become more productive not because you're doing more, but because what you're doing is in sync with who you are becoming. Perception plays a central role in your ability to enter and remain in flow. When you see life as something you must conquer, you naturally approach it with tension. You brace for impact. You work harder than necessary, but when you perceive life as a partner, an intelligent force collaborating with your intention, you stop bracing and start co-creating. You begin to read the signs, trust the timing, and interpret delays as direction. You stop trying to outwork the unknown and start moving with the natural unfolding of things. This is not passive waiting, it is powerful attunement. Or, what is able to move a mountain if you cannot? The flow state life also requires honesty. You cannot live in flow while betraying yourself. You cannot move with clarity while ignoring your truth. When you say yes to things that drain you, when you stay in environments that numb you, when you act out of obligation instead of inspiration, you disrupt the current. Flow requires alignment, and alignment often requires boundaries. It means choosing authenticity over approval. It means following your energy, not just your logic. It means being brave enough to release what no longer fits, even if it once did. Flow lives where truth lives, and when you honor that truth, momentum returns. Living in flow does not mean everything is predictable. In fact, it means embracing uncertainty without losing your center. When you're in flow, you stop needing to map out every detail. You develop trust in the unfolding. You move one step at a time with full presence, knowing that the next step will reveal itself when needed. This trust frees you from the paralysis of over-planning and the fear of making the wrong move. It allows you to remain flexible, creative, and open to paths you didn't expect. And because you are not attached to one specific route, you are more likely to reach the destination that truly matches your vision. Another key aspect of flow is emotional regulation. You will not remain in flow if every disruption knocks you off course. Challenges will come, uncertainty will arise, but the more grounded you are in your perception, the more quickly you can return to alignment. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means feeling without losing your footing. You develop emotional resilience not by avoiding difficulty, but by meeting it with presence and interpreting it through the lens of growth. Flow is not about bypassing life. It is about being fully engaged with it while choosing to move through it with grace. The more you practice living in flow, the more life seems to meet you with synchronicity. Ideas arrive at the right moment. People appear just when you need them. Solutions emerge that logic alone could not have produced. These moments are not random. They are reflections of a deeper harmony between your inner state and your external reality. When you live in a high state of internal alignment, you attract experiences that match that frequency. Life begins to feel less like a series of struggles and more like a meaningful conversation between your energy and the world around you. This way of living is not about escaping responsibility or floating through life without structure. It is about creating a life that feels spacious even in motion, grounded even in change, inspired even in uncertainty. It is a life where your perception is not reactive but responsive, where you are not chasing success but aligning with it, where you do not collapse under pressure but adapt with clarity. Flow is not something you force, it is something you allow, and when you allow it often enough, it becomes your natural way of being. To live in flow is to trust yourself deeply. It is to know that you can handle whatever arises, that you are always guided, and that life is unfolding in ways that support your highest path. When you hold that perception as your foundation, everything changes, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop fighting the process. You begin to see every step as sacred, every pause as purposeful, and every challenge as an opportunity to return to your center. That is the flow state life, not a destination, but a way of moving through the world with openness, trust, and alignment. Chapter 17. The flow is you. At some point in the journey of shifting your perception, you begin to realize that the flow you've been chasing is not somewhere out there. It's not locked inside a goal, a future event, or an external change in circumstances. It is not something you arrive at after completing a perfect checklist or earning a certain amount of validation. The flow is not separate from you. It is you. It is your natural state when you strip away the doubt, the resistance, the outdated stories, and the borrowed limitations. When you stop trying to become and instead allow yourself to be, you come into contact with the version of yourself that doesn't have to force alignment. You are the one who opens or blocks the current, not because you are doing anything wrong, but because perception is powerful and habits of thought are persistent. If you believe life is hard, your actions will mirror that belief. If you believe flow is rare, you'll struggle to notice it. even when it's right in front of you. But when you return to the understanding that your perception directs your experience and your experience reinforces your perception, you begin to recognize that you have always had the ability to choose something different, not once, but repeatedly. Not intellectually, but viscerally. And that repeated choice builds a new normal. This shift isn't about pretending you no longer face challenges. It's about relating to those challenges from a new place. You stop making them personal. You stop letting them dictate your worth. You stop seeing them as evidence that things aren't working, and start understanding them as part of the rhythm of creation. Even in contrast, even in waiting, even in uncertainty, you begin to feel connected to something deeper. The quiet assurance grows that things are moving in your favor even when they look still. That quiet is not the absence of progress, it is the space where your energy recalibrates, where your perception matures, where your future self is being formed in silence. Eventually, you become the evidence of everything you once had to convince yourself of. You live the shift. You embody the energy of someone who no longer needs proof because you are the proof. You attract without chasing. You influence without pushing. You create without clinging. And the life that begins to form around you reflects the internal shift you've made. You are no longer driven by urgency, but guided by clarity, no longer reacting to every challenge as a crisis, but responding with presence and wisdom. You've stopped fighting life and started dancing with it. This isn't passivity, it's power, refined and redirected. What you once saw as coincidence becomes confirmation. What you once called luck, you now recognize as alignment. The people you once felt distant from either rise to meet your energy or gently fall away. The habits that once drained you lose their grip. The old narratives that used to loop in your mind now sound foreign, outdated, irrelevant, because they no longer match the frequency you're living from. You no longer identify with struggle. You no longer define yourself by the things you've had to overcome. You've rewritten the script so completely that the past no longer has power over your future. It informed you, but it no longer limits you. In this state, desire becomes lighter. It is not about fixing yourself or filling a void. It's about expression, creativity, contribution. You desire from fullness, not lack. You move toward your visions not with desperation, but with devotion. You don't grasp, you receive. You don't prove, you express. Your perception now serves you not because it's perfect, but because it's been purified. It's been trained to see beyond survival and into possibility. You trust life not because it's always comfortable, but because you've experienced what happens when you stop resisting its timing and start flowing with its intelligence. The final shift is subtle but profound. You no longer see flow as something you step into. You see that you are the flow. You are not separate from the intelligence that governs expansion, creation, and alignment. It moves through you when you're present, when you're authentic, when you're willing to trust the process more than the plan. The flow is not a state you visit, it's your home. And the more you remember that, the less you seek it, and the more you live it. Your entire life becomes a reflection of that inner alignment, a steady unfolding of clarity, ease, and meaningful action. This isn't about reaching a perfect state and staying there. It's about knowing how to return to it. When life gets noisy, you return to presence. When things feel off, you recalibrate. When fear whispers, you meet it with truth. You don't need to live in resistance anymore because you know the way back to center. And from that center, you lead, you create, you live. Not from pressure, but from peace. This journey you've taken through perception has never been about fixing who you are. It's always been about remembering. The flow is not the destination, it is your default. And now, because you've shifted how you see, how you feel, how you choose, you are living the very thing you once hoped to find. The flow is you, and you've finally come home. Chapter 18. The return to power. There comes a point in every transformational journey where the shift becomes irreversible, not because circumstances guarantee it, but because your perception no longer allows you to go backward. You've seen too much, you've felt too much, you've experienced the difference between reacting and responding, between forcing and allowing, between controlling and co-creating. You can no longer pretend that your mindset doesn't shape your world, that your energy doesn't influence your outcomes, or that your perception isn't a creative force. What used to be ideas or inspiration has now become embodiment. This is the return to power. Not the kind of power that dominates or pushes, but the quiet, grounded authority that comes from knowing who you are and how reality works when you're aligned with it. Returning to your power does not mean you never feel fear again. It means you no longer confuse fear for truth. You can observe it, acknowledge it, even feel it fully, without giving it the authority to direct your path. You stop handing over your future to your past. You stop deferring your clarity to outside opinions. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and begin creating it with your presence. Power is not in having all the answers. Power is in how you carry yourself in the unknown. It's in how you interpret discomfort, how you hold your vision, and how you continue showing up when external validation is absent. This return to power also means taking full responsibility for your life. Not blame, not guilt, but responsibility. You recognize that your choices, your reactions, and your perspective are always within your control. Even when you can't change what's happening, you can always choose how you respond to it. This is where real freedom lives, not in the illusion of control, but in the sovereignty of perception. You no longer wait for circumstances to improve before you allow yourself to feel grounded or confident or peaceful. You bring those energies into the present moment, regardless of what's unfolding around you. And when you do that consistently, the external begins to adjust itself to match your internal stability. Owning your power also shifts your relationship with time. You stop rushing, chasing, or measuring your worth by timelines that were never yours to begin with. You stop comparing your path to anyone else's because you know perception defines pace. You realize that there is no behind, only alignment. You trust that your timing is not off, it's being orchestrated. This doesn't mean you stop pursuing your goals. It means you pursue them without panic. You hold them with certainty, not urgency. You are no longer powered by fear of missing out, but by a deeper knowing that nothing meant for you can pass you by if you keep showing up in alignment. You also begin to notice your influence, not because you seek control over others, but because you've become aware of how energy precedes behavior. Your presence begins to carry a frequency that affects rooms, conversations, decisions. People may not always understand it, but they feel it. They respond to it. This is not charisma. It is coherence. It is the result of a perception that has been purified, focused, and stabilized. You are no longer chasing energy, you are generating it. You are not pulling people toward your vision, you are becoming the vision. And that embodiment draws in what resonates and repels what doesn't. Returning to your power also means setting higher standards, not just in what you expect from others, but in what you expect from yourself. You become less tolerant of thoughts that drain you, environments that shrink you, or habits that fragment your energy. You no longer make excuses for what you know needs to shift. You do the work without needing applause. You make decisions that match your future, not your fear. And when things don't go as planned, you don't collapse. You recalibrate. You revisit your perception, reconnect to your center, and return to your power again and again. In this space, boundaries become natural, not forced. You don't need to defend them loudly because your energy already makes them clear. You don't need to convince others to respect them because you no longer tolerate what conflicts with your peace. Your perception has taught you that saying no is not rejection, it's redirection. That choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. That making space for your own expansion is not indulgent, it's your responsibility. You move differently now, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've remembered what it feels like to be deeply in tune with your own truth. This return to power is not the end of your journey, it is the beginning of a new way of living. It is the point at which perception becomes practice, where theory becomes embodiment, and where alignment becomes your new default. You no longer ask, "How do I get there?" because you've realized there is no there, only deeper layers of truth to live out. You begin to trust the unfolding more than the outcome. You begin to trust yourself more than the noise. You don't need certainty from the outside world because you've cultivated it from within. Power in its highest form is peace. It is presence. It is the ability to remain centered, clear, and grounded no matter what life presents. It is the ability to lead your energy rather than follow your emotions. It is the discipline of choosing your perception again and again, not because it's easy, but because you've tasted what happens when you do. The return to power is the return to yourself, not the version shaped by fear or doubt, but the one that existed before the world told you who to be, the one who already knew that perception creates reality. And now, you don't just believe it, you live it.